Today we received an anonymous tip that some sort of commotion was occurring at Mr. Bounderby's house. Let us follow our hidden cameras to see where they will take us and what we may find.
Come in, ma'am, or we'll have you dragged in. Catch Mr. Bounderby!
What's the matter now, Miss Sparsit, ma'am? Why don't you mind your own business, ma'am? How dare you go poke your officious nose into my family affairs?
My own boy. She threatened me that if I resisted her, I should be brought down by the constable. I thought that it would be better to come quietly than to make such a fuss in such a nice house. Indeed, it's not my fault, my dear, noble boy. I have always lived quiet and in secret, my dear. I have never broken the condition once. I never said I was your mother. I have admired you at a distance, and if I came into town sometimes, with long times between, it was just to take a proud peep at you. I have done it unbeknownst, my love, and gone away again.
Do you deny then, madame, that you left your son to be brought up in the gutter?
Josiah in the gutter? No such thing, sir. Never. For shame on you. My dear boy knows, and will give you to know that though he came from humble parents, his parents loved him as dear as best could, and never thought it hardship on themselves to pinch a bit when he might write and cipher beautiful, and I have his books at home to show it. And my dear boy knows, and will give you to know, sir, that his father died when he was 8 years old, and his mother, too, could pinch a bit, as was her duty and pleasure and her pride to do it, to keep him out in life, to make him apprentice. And a steady lad he was, and a kind of master he had to lend him a hand, and well he worked on his own way forward to be rich and thriving. And I'll give you to know, sir, for my dear boy won't, that though his mother kept but a little village shop, he never forgot her, but pensioned me £30 a year, more than I want, for I put by out of it, only making the condition that I was to keep down on my part and make no boast about him, and not trouble him. I knew I never have, except with looking at him once a year, when he never knowed it. And it's right that I should keep down in my own part, and I have no doubts that if I was here, I should do many unbefitting things. And I am well contented, and I keep my pride in my Josiah to myself, and I can love for love's own sake. And I am ashamed of you, sir, for your slanders and suspicions. And if I never stood here before, nor never wanted to stand here when my son said no. And I shall be here now, if I hadn't been for being brought here. And for shame on you, oh, for shame, to accuse me of being a bad mother to my son. For my son is standing here to tell you so different.
Well, this certainly is a discovery. A woman suspected of bank robbery is proved to be the mother of the banker himself. Mr. Bounderby, no longer the self-made man he claims to be. Let us hear what others have to say about this later on Found. Hello, and welcome to Found, finding yesterday's lies in today's blunders. Today we have a special guest for you folks, Mrs. Sparsit, the young woman who worked with Mr. Bounderby, the no longer self-made man who claimed to once be. It has recently been realized that Mr. Bounderby was actually raised by his own mother and father. Mrs. Sparsit, how are you doing today?
Quite fine.
You once worked and lived with Mr. Bounderby, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever notice anything amiss when he would tell his story about his young childhood?
Well, of course.
And what did Mr. Bounderby tell you of his childhood?
It was nothing but tears and gutters.
Gutters. How comparable are gutters to loving parents, pinching money at every angle to provide for their young son? In my opinion, gutters are no comparison. Mrs. Sparsit, how did this finding change your opinion of Mr. Bounderby?
I always knew he was a noodle.
A noodle. Squirmy and lying. Lying flat on the plate of society. This is where we find Mr. Bounderby today. Mr. Bounderby. Found. Hello, and welcome back to Found. Today we have a very special guest for you. Mr. Bounderby's ex-best friend. Welcome, please, Mr. Gradgrind. Hello, Mr. Gradgrind. How are you doing today?
Very fun. How are you?
Now, it's true that you once worked in the schoolhouse alongside Mr. Bounderby. Is that correct?
It is.
And what were your feelings upon seeing Mrs. Pegler for the first time?
You cannot fathom the loathing I felt when I saw her, and I cannot believe she had the audacity to come back after leaving her son in the gutters for all those years.
And when did you realize that Mrs. Pegler was actually telling the truth?
When I saw the loving look that she had in her eyes every time she talked about him.
Can you believe that someone raised by such a loving woman could turn this upbringing into a myth?
Not even a little bit. He was my best friend and now my daughter's husband, and he lied to me over and over. And out of all the people in the world, I trusted him the most. Don't know how he could do that to me.
And there you have it. A man who can lie to not only himself, but to those he loves and cares for. Mr. Bounderby, found in the midst of a lie. Hello, and welcome back to Found. Today we will be talking to our third and final guest, Louisa Bounderby, the once Mrs. Bounderby. Let us please welcome Louisa. Hello, Louisa. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Now, to begin, what are your feelings on the lies that Mr. Bounderby has put forth as truth?
I'm not really sure. I've been reevaluating a lot of things right now, from my marriage and my husband to my upbringing.
Now, you decided to leave your husband, is that correct?
It is.
Did this departure have anything to do with Mr. Bounderby's lies?
No, his lies didn't really affect me. I left him more in a search for my own self.
So, would you have stayed with him if you had known that he grew up with loving and nurturing parents?
No, I don't think I would have.
So, you don't have his lies don't have any effect on you?
Not personally, no.
Well, this is an interesting way to look at it, folks. We begin with a heartbroken best friend and end with an indifferent wife. Now, we have found the true Mr. Bounderby, uncovered the lies of yesterday using today's blunders. Thank you and good night.